Here at Crime A to Z, we spend an embarrassing amount of time on case selection, looking for intriguing cases that have also not had much or any coverage. So inevitably, we encounter cases that may check all the boxes for being a good case to cover, but they're just too much. Too gruesome, too heinous, too disturbing. Or even worse. Well, sit tight, because we're going to list for you those cases that continue to make us rethink the goodness in humanity. Welcome back to Crime A to Z, where we detail cases and criminals from their very beginning until well after other reporting ends. We're switching things up a bit in this video. Today, we're sharing 5 of the cases we wish we'd never heard of, counting down to the most disturbing of them all. We've covered some of the cases on this channel already, but for others, we had to wave the white flag. Before we begin, if you have a spare moment and decide that you like this video, we really appreciate a like and a subscribe. Let's go. Coming in at number 5 is one of the very first cases we covered when we started the channel, the case of the Hello Kitty murder. Not the beloved, adorable fictional character you typically think of when you think of Hello Kitty, but a brutal crime that involved using a Hello Kitty stuffed animal in a way it was not intended. Without giving away any spoilers, the case revolved around a tormented runaway who had witnessed and even participated in some of the most brutal torture of a person imaginable.
Fan was subjected to indescribable torment on a regular basis by the group, while still servicing the customers who came to this one-person brothel. Her treatment got worse over time as word got out that there was a prostitute who could be roughed up without her pimp objecting.
The torture itself was hard enough to process, but once it got to a level that became unbearable to even listen to, we had to take breaks, including when the story started involving incomprehensible instruments and levels of brutality that you would think any one of the numerous participants would have stopped. Coming in at number 4 is a case that we've actually never covered, the case of Junko. We've had a few of you request in the comments that we cover it, but the case has already been exhaustively covered. It's one of the most extensively covered true crime cases out there, and frankly, given the off-the-rails disturbing brutality we uncovered after preliminary research, we're not upset that we decided not to cover it. To give you a taste of why, one of the details involved the perpetrators covering their hands with plastic bags while beating Junko to avoid getting soiled from the blood and pus from her infected burns. The attacks lasted for hours, and only grew in severity over the 40 days they held her captive, torturing her, starving her, raping her, killing her. As the torture got even more horrifying, we'd had enough. Next on the list is a case that we did cover. We're still not sure why, because it was the most difficult case to get through thus far. It's the 1984 McDonald's Massacre. Our writer said she still recalls how she read the recommendation to cover the case in the comments, Googled it to check it out, then immediately said, "Hell no, we can't do that one." She couldn't even make it through the early details, so immersing herself in the case was unthinkable. But, as we mentioned at the beginning of that video, we took it in chunks. The case details the moment-by-moment details that took place inside a McDonald's restaurant in San Ysidro, California in 1984. Diving deep into the specifics of the dozens of heartbreaking scenarios that unfolded during those agonizing minutes. The mothers and fathers, the sons and daughters, the old, the very young, the brave. No one was spared this monster's wrath. It's July 1984, and a mad gunman has been in the McDonald's in San Ysidro for more than 30 minutes, shooting everyone in sight. He'd revisit his victims to make sure they were dead and shoot them again if they were not, or even if they were. The 17-year-old young man has been shot 5 times, but is still alive. And despite being shot in the leg and unable to walk, he crawls and drags himself down a flight of 25 stairs and hides in a basement closet, joining one of the few groups of survivors of the deadliest mass shooting, up until that point. It was hands down the saddest case we covered up until that point, and we haven't covered another mass shooting since. It will be a while. Down to our top 2 cases we wish we never heard of. Coming in at number 2 is another one of our very first cases, the case of Suzanne Capper. Like we mentioned at the beginning of that video, that case made us question whether we wanted to continue the channel. Half our team had trouble sleeping at night as a direct result of this case. Sometime during the week, Jeffrey and Clifford came by the house where Suzanne was gagged and tied to the bed. She had been lying in her own urine and feces for days. The pair put Suzanne in a bathtub containing disinfectant and brutally scrubbed her with a stiff brush with such force that it literally scrubbed the skin off of her body. If that weren't excruciating enough, Clifford then used pliers. The torture is nightmare-inducing. Consider yourself warned. And that leads us to the number one case we wish we'd never heard of. This case we have not covered. Honestly, we may still cover it in the future. Because the deeper we dug, the more intriguing the facts became, and the higher the shocking corruption seemed to run. The mercilessness and brutality, mind-blowing twists, and potential cover-ups were everywhere we turned. But none of that prepared us for the deeply buried, dark side of the case we eventually discovered. The case of Marc Dutroux is plenty dark enough on its own, involving on the surface the disappearances of multiple females across Belgium, their murders, and their abuse. Some of the victims were rescued in dramatic fashion, while others' brutal fate was far, far sadder, including one pair of victims who starved to death, left in Dutroux' secret basement while he was away in jail for months. So, the story on its surface could easily have stood alone as we were nearing the end of our research. That's when we dove a level too deep, discovering the buried, hidden accounts of the torture chambers that involved acts against the most vulnerable among us, in ways that stretched even our already overly crime and brutality exposed imaginations, in the worst way possible. We can't unhear any of it, can't unsee the utterly heartbreaking visuals it conjured up, and we wish we could. We may still cover this case minus some details from the darkest part in the future, so we'd appreciate it if you can let us know in the comments if it's one you watch, or whether you prefer to pass on this one. And those are the 5 cases we prefer we never heard of and wish they didn't exist. If you want to check out any of them that we've covered, we've put their links in the description. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this deviation from our normal cases. We've wanted to do this video for a while, so please let us know in the comments if you'd like us to deviate like this every once in a while, or whether you prefer we just stick to the cases. And as always, please be sure to hit like and subscribe if you liked this video and would like to see more. We genuinely appreciate you.